like the number of guards we're losing. We're going to need another guard, and yet you never know in this day and age. Might be. We'll check that basket sometime, I guess, and see what's in there, and then we'll figure out where we want to go from here. But the game plan is to definitely sign at least one more sometime throughout the year.
So if there are questions.
Tom, obviously he does not have the height, but I asked an NBA scout who had seen Matty a little bit about him. He said in the paint reminds him a lot of Akeem Olajuwon with his ball awareness. Do you see that?
I hope he's that good, but you know, he was, I mean, he's been ranked as high as the third best center, you know, and I think he does have, he's got to get better offensive production, but he does have those skills, and you saw with right and left hand, he's got that already. That was his junior year. He did get hurt a little bit in an accident, but he's starting to play again in a couple weeks, just with his hand, and yeah, I think, you know, when you see him athletically, just trying to think of a guy that we've seen, you know, like, I wish he has some of that Akeem's offensive production, but he's definitely got that and more athleticism. And the length is just, I'm starting to believe length might be more important than height.
So you've recruited big men in the past. You formed them into guys that can run that center lane transition. With him, he already has that component already. Does he stack up even further along in terms of being that five run the middle than others that you've had in the past?
I think running he does, you know, and I also think rebounding. He is he just believes every shot, every missed shot is his. In fact, every shot that goes up, he's going there. He rebounds with a vengeance, and in that respect, I think is going to fit in really well here. He'll continue to work on his offensive skills. He's a pretty good free throw shooter, but I think, yeah, running the court, rebounding the ball is, and blocking shots. I think he's going to be at a very high level.
I guess going along with Matty, what were sort of the early signs that you saw with him where you felt like that raw potential could translate into something bigger and better, I guess, down the line? What were those?
Well, as always, his high school coach, I guess, prep school coach Dave is, you know, Mike went there to look at another kid, to be honest with you, and saw Marty and said, man, I really like this kid. This was a year ago. And we started recruiting him a little bit, and then when we got to know the kid, another kid from, you know, from West Africa that just academically, personality, you talk to him, he calls you back, you know, he's kind of what, I guess if we said our kind of guy, he's kind of our kind of guy. And so we kind of fell in love with him that way. We got him up here early, and he really enjoyed his time here, and the rest was history. I mean, I thought, you know, at the end campus in Memphis, we're in there strong, and I think we had built a good enough relationship. And he's one of those guys that has something a lot of people don't have anymore. He had loyalty, and he had very, this is my path, this is what I want to do. If, you know, the Lakers came in, I don't think it would have bothered him, you know, and that's kind of a treat this day and age.
Tom, you mentioned AJ could go a couple different positions based on his size. Just wondering if you have an idea of where you'll start or if that'll be determined yet.
No, that'll be determined. Hell, I don't even know who I'll have. I barely know who I have tomorrow night. But definitely by the end of the year, you know, this is not a fun time for me, if you want the truth, because I just don't like the way recruiting in general is going, because I have to answer questions that you have to ask, and I can look you in the eye and say, I don't have an honest answer on any of it. You know, I think we're all going to be flying by the seat of our pants. I think that's what they want, and that's probably what we're going to get. And hopefully we're going to do it in the best organized way we can to keep some, you know, process here that makes sense for keeping your program above ground. But it isn't like it used to be where, you know, you had a junior, you had a senior, you had a freshman. You thought you were getting some guys, you knew they might be 1 or 2 and done. Some guys you thought would be 4-year players. I don't think there's any such thing of any of those anymore. So I just know this, the more versatile players we can get that can play multiple positions, the more it'll benefit us. But depending what happens, you know, with a lot of different guys on our team, that if they have good years, if they come out early, if they do this, if they do that, it's a little hard to say right now. But I do feel comfortable that he's a guy that can play multiple. He passes it good enough, plays some point. He's strong enough to play almost the 4 in this day and age. So I think he'll be able to play all over the place, and I think that benefits us. He can guard a lot of different positions. I think consistency with that 3-point shot will be one thing that he'll have to improve on. Maybe getting him in great shape. I think he's in decent shape, but I think he could improve in that area. And yet, we kind of fell in love with him just listening to him on the bench, to his teammates. He has very good leadership skills and is not afraid to use his voice.
With Millard, you mentioned that you're talking more on the offensive side of the three positions. I would imagine that defensively, could he guard 3 positions?
Oh, yeah.
But do you see that? You talk always about Detroit toughness. I mean, there's always been there about the Philly kids too. I'll say that since Quinn isn't here. So.
Yeah. No, you know, as you know, he's played in a tough league. Rip Hamilton kind of mentored him a little bit, I guess. And, Coach Phil. Yeah, and it's, you know, so the area he's from, his dad is, parents are both great, but his dad is, he's a lively guy that exudes energy, and the kid ends up at all like him. We got ourselves a gem, but I do think he could guard 3 and 4 positions because of his strength, because he has some size, but his strength really separates him.
Do you have a comparison for AJ? And I guess Marty too. I don't think I heard you say usually.
You know, Monty's different than most guys that we've had. An athlete like that at the 5 position. I'm trying to think who we have had in recent years, but he
You
is.
mentioned Jaron a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, Jaron a little bit. He's probably more athletic. He's not as big as Jaron. Doesn't shoot it as well as Jaron, but can run and do some things that way. Plus, I think where he's like Jaron, his personality is effervescent. He's one of those guys you're gonna enjoy being around, I think. And AJ, you know, I mean, he's got some Allen Anderson in him that he can play different positions. He's got a great first step. Needs to shoot it a little better, probably a better shooter than Allen was when he came, but he's kind of like that. Just trying to think who recently. You know, they're kind of unique. They're in their own way. You know, the versatility thing. You know, is he versatile like Denzel Valentine? He might be, and probably shoots it as well as Denzel did when he came. And now whether he'll improve on that like Denzel did, only time will tell. So I don't know. They're more kind of got their own personality, their own guys. But I do think it's good to recruit a guy that can both pass it, shoot it, and guard it. I think that is really needed. You know, that's one thing we're missing with Josh right now is we need a guy that can do all 3. Josh could do 2 of the 3, and it wasn't maybe the best passer, but he could definitely guard it and shoot it. And I think this kid will be able to do all those things before he's done.
You mentioned you got another opening. Could go a lot of different ways with it.
I think I'm pretty sure we'll go after a guard, but who knows what's going to happen between now and the spring. You know, I mean, there's a couple of guards we're looking at right now, to be honest with you, and we'll look that way. But you know, we might get to take the best player too. I think so many things are changing now. You know, who's in that that magical chair or box or pail or whatever we're calling it, that I'm not calling it, who's in that would make a difference. You know, I think depending on what everybody does, I might need other things, but I feel really good right now about this. I think inside we've really got some solid, we're getting more and more excited about, you know, the progress those two freshmen are making. I think both guys are demonstrating some things offensively and defensively that are going to be good for us. So I think we're going to need help when you lose Kyle, when you lose Cassius, of course, and we've lost Josh. We're losing a lot more at the guard position, and hopefully that's something we'll show.
Is there a little balance too of whether you have to use it? Now, you could always say, let's not force it if we don't think we have the right guy.
You know, and I guess that depends on, let's see, what are the variables now? Who goes pro, who enters their name, who transfers, or who graduates. We got a lot of different, recruiting is a confusing part of my job now, but you're right, we could hold the scholarship depending, but I think this day and age, everybody says you should hold the scholarship till late, so maybe this works out good that we used two and we've kind of got one to go. But when you start doing the numbers, guys, the one thing that I wouldn't at any school anymore figure on is, you know, you want to say, well, you got one scholarship left, you got no scholarships left. We got a lot of scholarships. Everybody's got a lot of scholarships every year, and that is the sad part of what's happening. You know, coaches are going to be doing more where if a guy isn't playing to his best, they won't be keeping guys like they used to keep them. It's just, it's one of those unintended consequences I think you're going to see that doesn't benefit the student athlete. And maybe that won't happen. Hopefully it'll happen very little here, but I think it's gonna be a mad rush for it before it's over.
And that was kind of where I was going. I mean, you kind of mentioned that about keeping one back for the spring with the split signing periods. I mean, is that something that you have to start thinking more of just because of the additional guys that get put back onto the market with their decisions?
Put back onto the market. Well, the other thing is, you know, I think there's always going to be scholarships to have. You know, we're teaching kids not to be happy to go through a process of any kind, so we've all got to be prepared for that too. It'll probably end up the worst part of my job, but today is an exciting part of my job because I'm very pleased and happy with the two kids we got. I think, you know, we definitely want guys that want to be here. And I think we've got two guys that definitely want to be here. And I don't know if I'll hold the scholarship back. I just think that every spring you're going to look at most programs, and see that they have more scholarships than you think they'd had in the fall. And, you know, I'm hoping it doesn't happen here. I'm hoping that we keep some roster management issues solid, but just looking at the landscape of everything, I think these are one of the things that are hard for coaches, hard for programs, but I think they're going to find out as more and more people think the transfer route is the way to go, that there's going to be unintended consequences, that maybe they don't get to go where they thought they were going to get to go, and then do they even have a scholarship at places. And, you know, I will publicly say I feel bad about that. I will privately say much worse, and I will always say that I still have a feeling when it's all said and done, more kids are going to lose out than benefit. And that's sad for the kids, because, you know, if I leave here tomorrow, if somebody else comes, you know, the next day, these walls ain't caving in. Colleges go nowhere. It's still the kids that I think I really love more than anyone.
Two recruiting questions, Tom. First of all, you've talked about when a player leaves early, it's good for recruiting, but I'm curious, you have a potential couple that you never know could go. You mentioned the transfer, whatever you want to call it, whatever. How hard has it exponentially made recruiting more difficult when you think your class is signed? You almost still have to be watching and recruiting in case any of that happens. That's my first.
Well, there's some major program teams. If we're in that blue blood group, but there's some others in that blue blood group in the last 2-3 years that are signing guys the end of August for that year. That's never happened in the history of the world. You know, that's what we're up against. So, yeah, no, my job will end. When do we start school?
It's a 12-month process.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. Whatever the day we start school, my job will end on that year's team that day. And then it starts for the next 2 or 3 years. So the days of my first, I think it was somewhere 7 of my first 10 years, we had commitments from every kid in July. And you kind of knew you were done then, and you kind of knew what most of them knew. That day, you know, that boat has left, you know, that horse has left the barn, and which is okay. But I do think it's going to get harder on coaches because how do you be honest with a kid? You know, I mean, how do you? I mean, there's schools out there recruiting like, you know, you're going to be the only one, and then in August they pick up 2 from the transfer area. So I mean, it's just going to be very difficult. I think kids are going to be going crazy on that, and I think coaches are going to go crazy because you're right. We'll never quit recruiting. We won't quit recruiting for next year, and we won't quit recruiting for the year after and the year after. That'll never end. It'll drive you guys a little bit nuts, us totally crazy, but that's the way it'll be.
Second question was watching a national discussion today about the transferring and how it's players' rights and all the things that we've heard. So I have a question, since everyone says that these kids could, when they prepares them for the real world, that they could leave for their job. Would you like to see if they're going to give players the ability to transfer whenever they want, that if a player doesn't perform to the standards that you recruit them, that you could let them out of their scholarship and dismiss them?
No, you know better than that. That's not the American way. It's there's a lot of one-way streets in that situation, and some people think it's a one-way street that coaches can leave. I can't argue that. I guess I could leave anytime I want. I think I know what it would cost me or a lot of coaches. But, you know, guys, we get into a philosophical discussion with some of my favorite people on TV that are my favorite people. But I'm not going to do that because I don't know the ramifications of all this. I'm just amazed how all these people are commenting on these different topics that are out there. And, you know, usually we have these long studies before we change policy. We're doing it like that now. And when you do it like that, there will be unintended consequences. When I talk to some of our Olympic sports, and they tell me about the number of people in some of those sports that don't even end up with a scholarship, I don't think that goes through anybody's brain. You know, loyalty is a two-way street, and I don't know what'll happen with that. I don't have the answers. I just know that I'll never, to the day I die, believe that when the going gets tough, you hit the road. I'll always believe that people can make mistakes. Players, coaches, everybody can make mistakes. But, you know, I fear being fired every day. That is a good thing. It is a good thing. You should fear that if you don't do your job, somebody's going to replace you. It's the same for a player. It's the same for a coach. And it's definitely the same for media people. You know, you don't do your job, someone should replace you. And so, I just feel like it's going to cause more kids to just jump out and not really fight through things. And if that's what you are, that's probably what will happen to you at a lot of different in my opinion. Other people have different opinions. I will say this, I know what I believe, but I'm not gonna arrogantly say I know what's gonna happen, because nobody does. You know, we're in uncharted waters a little bit. So I'm just trying to get my arms around, how do we handle it? You know, it wasn't that long ago that we had a 4-year scholarship. So if we gave a kid a scholarship, he was guaranteed that unless he did something criminally wrong, he had that scholarship for 4 years. I don't even hear about it anymore. I don't know where that is, but it's gonna be, in my opinion, it's gonna be a little crazier and a little, I don't enjoy what I'm seeing. That could change as things go on, and, you know, maybe it works out. I worry about the culture of the program. You know, if you don't have people in your program, you don't have juniors and seniors teaching your freshmen and sophomore what to do. There's just a lot of things. I worry about fans being connected to players that they usually get to be connected to for a few years. So I look at all those things, but other people that are a lot smarter than me look at other things. And the rights of a player, I mean, I'm not against the rights of a player. You know, I'm not against the rights of a player in any way, shape, or form. I think when you go with not as much accountability, with no rules, then it becomes the wild, wild west. And that's my take.
You got time for like one or two more?
That was